The rain hammered against the school windows like tiny fists demanding attention, each drop carrying the weight of autumn's promise. David Martinez sat in his pickup truck, engine idling, watching the elementary school doors through the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers. His daughter Emma would emerge any moment, backpack bouncing, ready to chatter about her day. But today, something was different. Today, his 6-year-old would teach him a lesson about compassion that would echo through generations. Emma burst through the doors, but instead of her usual sprint to the truck, she walked slowly, her small hand clutching that of another girl. David squinted through the rain-streaked glass. The other child was tiny, even smaller than Emma, with tangled dark hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her shoes, he noticed with a father's eye for detail, had holes that let the puddles seep through. "Daddy, this is Lucia," Emma announced breathlessly as she climbed into the truck, practically dragging the other girl with her. "She's all alone, Daddy. Her mama didn't come." David turned to look at the girl properly. Lucia couldn't have been more than 5, with enormous brown eyes that held too much understanding for her age. She stood there dripping in his truck, shivering not just from the cold but from something deeper. Fear, maybe. Or the kind of loneliness that settles into your bones when you're too young to understand why the world feels so big and empty. "Honey," David said gently to Emma, "we need to take Lucia back inside. Her mom is probably just running late." "No, Daddy," Emma's voice carried that stubborn note he knew so well, the same one she'd inherited from her mother. "Mrs. Patterson already called." Nobody answered. She said Lucia has to wait until someone comes, but what if nobody comes? What if she has to sleep here? The thought hit David like a physical blow. He looked at Lucia again, really looked at her. Her clothes were clean but worn thin, carefully mended in places. Her shoes were too big, probably hand-me-downs. But it was her eyes that broke his heart, old eyes in a young face, eyes that had learned not to expect too much. "Is that true, sweetheart?" David asked Lucia softly. "Is there someone we should call for you?" Lucia shook her head, water droplets flying from her hair. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Mama works 2 jobs. Sometimes she forgets. Sometimes she can't come." The simple acceptance in those words hit David harder than any tantrum could have. This little girl had learned to expect disappointment, to make peace with being forgotten. At 5 years old, she'd already developed the quiet dignity of someone who'd learned not to be a burden. Emma's small hand found Lucia's and squeezed. "See, Daddy, she needs us." David's throat felt tight. 6 months ago, he'd been a different man, successful architect, focused on deadlines and profit margins, measuring his worth by the size of his latest project. Then Sarah had gotten sick. Cancer, swift and merciless, had taken his wife in 4 months, leaving him fumbling to be both mother and father to Emma. He'd learned to braid hair badly, to pack lunches, improving, and to listen, really listen, to what his daughter needed. What she needed now, apparently, was to save another little girl. "Okay," he said, surprising himself. "But first we need to talk to Mrs. Patterson." Inside the school, Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher, looked frazzled. "Oh, Mr. Martinez, thank goodness. I was hoping you might have some suggestions. I've called Lucia's emergency contacts, but the numbers are disconnected. Her mother works evenings at the hospital and cleans offices at night. Social services is backed up, and honestly." She lowered her voice. "This has happened before. Lucia usually just waits until her mother can get here, sometimes very late." David felt something shift inside his chest. How late is very late? Last time it was nearly midnight. The poor child fell asleep on the bench in the hallway. Emma tugged at his jacket. "Daddy, tell her Lucia can come home with us." The rational part of David's mind began cataloging all the reasons this was complicated. Background checks, legal procedures, the fact that he was still figuring out single parenthood himself. But then he looked down at Lucia, who was studying the floor tiles with intense concentration, trying to make herself invisible. "What would we need to do?" he found himself asking. Mrs. Patterson's face brightened. "Well, technically, I could release her to you with a signed form, especially given the circumstances. If you could keep her until we reach her mother." "Yes," David said before he could second-guess himself. "Yes, we'll take her." The drive home was quiet except for Emma's steady stream of chatter, filling the silence for all of them. She told Lucia about their house, about Max the golden retriever, about the tree house David had been building in the backyard before Sarah got sick and he'd abandoned the project. At home, David watched as Emma took charge with the natural authority of someone who'd recently learned to be helpful. She found dry clothes for Lucia, showed her where the bathroom was, and explained the rules about Max. He's friendly but he drools, so don't wear anything fancy. While the girls played in Emma's room, David called the hospital. After 20 minutes of transfers and hold music, he reached Carmen Reyes, Lucia's mother. Mr. Martinez. Her voice was tight with panic and exhaustion. Is Lucia okay? I'm so sorry, I couldn't leave work, my supervisor said if I left early again. She's fine, David interrupted gently. She's safe. She's here with us, and she's going to stay for dinner. You don't need to rush. The silence on the other end stretched so long that David wondered if they'd been disconnected. Then he heard something that made his chest ache, the sound of a mother trying not to cry. I don't know how to thank you, Carmen whispered. Things have been so hard since her father left. I'm trying, but some days. You don't need to explain, David said. I understand about trying to hold it all together. When Carmen arrived 3 hours later, David opened the door to find a woman who looked like an older version of Lucia, the same enormous brown eyes, the same careful dignity. She was still in scrubs from the hospital, her hair pulled back in a tired ponytail. Mama. Lucia launched herself into her mother's arms, and for a moment, Carmen's carefully maintained composure cracked. She buried her face in her daughter's hair, holding her like she might disappear. Over Lucia's head, Carmen met David's eyes. I can't pay you back for this kindness, she said quietly. You don't need to pay anything back, David replied. But maybe we could help each other out sometimes. I'm still figuring out this single-parent thing myself. And that's how it started. Not with grand gestures or life-changing decisions, but with the simple recognition that sometimes we all need someone to catch us when we fall. Carmen began watching Emma on the evenings when David had late client meetings. David started picking up Lucia when Carmen's shifts ran long. The girls became inseparable, and slowly, carefully, their families began to weave together. Months later, as David finished the tree house he'd abandoned after Sarah's death, he watched Emma and Lucia painting the walls with more enthusiasm than skill. They were arguing good-naturedly about whether the house should be purple or pink, both of them covered in more paint than the walls. Daddy, Emma called down, Lucia says her mama might want to paint too. Can she come up and help? David looked over at Carmen, who was sitting on the back porch, grading the nursing school assignments she completed between her 2 jobs and raising her daughter. She looked up and smiled, the first truly relaxed smile he'd seen from her. I think that's a great idea, he called back. As Carmen climbed up into the tree house, joining the girls in their cheerful chaos, David realized that Emma had been right that rainy afternoon. Lucia had been all alone. But in saving her, they'd somehow saved themselves too. They'd learned that families aren't just born, sometimes they're built, one small act of kindness at a time. The tree house, when they finally finished it, was painted in stripes of purple and pink. It was gloriously imperfect, just like the family that had built it together. And on warm evenings, you could find all 4 of them up there, watching the sunset and planning tomorrow's adventures, no longer alone.